Alison McGovern.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And can I begin by paying tribute to those members who've made their maiden speeches today, the member for Wirral West, Stevenage and Rochdale, all excellent contributions. My contribution this afternoon won't be anything like as expert as those we heard from my right honourable friend, the member for York Central and Glasgow North. They gave wide-ranging speeches that covered many aspects, and I want to just highlight two particular points in relation to global poverty to the House briefly. Firstly, on the importance of trade, and most particularly fair trade, and secondly on the role of democracy and backing up organised labour in poor countries and in supporting those people on very low incomes in fragile employment, and that the importance of that in tackling global poverty. Firstly, on fair trade, this is an issue that, of course, we are all aware that in the end aid is not the final answer, that it's as a tool to assist economic development. And I have felt very strongly for many years of the possibilities of fair trade labelling. And I think we're now coming to see some of the fruition of what started many years ago as an idea that if you could tell people in consumer countries that the goods that they were going to buy somehow backed up those people on low incomes in producer companies, you would have a mechanism of delivering on economic development. And I would pay real tribute to the previous government's achievements on this in supporting the Fair Trade Foundation in this country. And we've seen a massive expansion of the fair trade label. 70% of people in Britain now recognise the fair trade label and understand what it means. 7 out of 10. I think that's a real achievement. And we've seen the adoption of that label by major brands in this country. And so we see many people around the UK taking that choice to back producers in other countries, and that's a victory. I would make this challenge gently to the government to continue to support the Fair Trade Foundation. We're rightly seeking to reduce the deficit, but the sums that we're talking about in assisting international organisations that monitor this kind of labelling are small, but they have the power to do real good. I feel particularly strongly about this as it combines two of my biggest passions in life. Firstly, shopping, and secondly, employment and supporting those on low incomes abroad. I have a personal commitment, which I would recommend to all members of the House, that whenever I see a new product with the Fair Trade label, I buy it, whatever it is. And I would recommend that to everybody. And before you know it, you always buy Fair Trade coffee, which is great. So, as I said, I would encourage the new government ministers to look carefully at that programme to see what more we can do in this country to back up fair trade. Secondly, I wanted to speak in the debate this afternoon because I came across an example in my own constituency in Wirral South where trade union members in this country had backed a campaign of trade union members in Pakistan, and I found it quite inspiring, and I wanted to share with the House the success that they had had. But firstly, I want to share with you the quote of Amartya Sen, the Nobel laureate and a fine philosopher and a very fine economist. And he has done extensive research into the subject of famine and food security. And he made this comment. He said, "No major famine has ever occurred in a functioning democracy with regular elections, opposition parties, basic freedoms of speech and a relatively free media." And I think that's a lesson to us all, that what we must do is support the well-functioning of democracy in other countries. And we can't allow a discussion about global poverty to pass by without recognising the politics that exist in other countries. In that light, I think especially important is well-functioning trade unions. And I mentioned that this had been highlighted with me by local members of a trade union in Wirral South. Unilever, a company that has its base in my constituency, is by and large a fine employer to work with. I hear great representations from those people who work for Unilever in my constituency who say it's fantastic to work for. However, at one of their tea production plants in Karaval in Pakistan, 723 workers were contracted to Unilever via an agency on a no work, no pay basis. Now, as somebody who's from Merseyside and has grown up with the tales of what used to go on in Liverpool's docks and the kind of memory in my family of what it was like to go down to the dockside and not know whether you would be able to get work today, not know whether you'd be able to feed your family today, I feel passionately that we must seek to end these practices wherever they are. It wasn't right that it happened in Liverpool all those years ago, and it's not right if it happens anywhere else in the world today. These workers also had no sick leave, no annual leave, and no right to join a trade union. So what happened was that they organised themselves, and through the support of an international union, the IUF, they were able to make representations about dealing with this, and they received support from trade union activists all over the world. Eventually, the IUF helped them to undergo negotiations with Unilever, and these negotiations took place under the auspices of the UK's national contact point, responsible for the application of the OECD guidelines for multinational enterprises. So the International Trade Union was able to facilitate negotiations with Unilever. They came to a settlement, and under the terms of this settlement, Unilever agreed to create 200 additional permanent jobs, and they have had many successful outcomes in addition to this. The IUF General Secretary commented that the Kanawal Agreement is a great moment for hundreds of our members in Pakistan who will now take up permanent employment. It brings better livelihoods for the families and some dignity and security at work. He went on to say, Unilever's willingness to work with us so constructively through the OECD process suggests that we may look forward to an ongoing and structured dialogue with them. I think I wanted to highlight this to the House because I think it's a real success, and it just shows when people are given the dignity to stand up for themselves and their own work and their terms and conditions, the success that they can achieve. I know this is one small example, but I think it's the pattern we need to follow. And I would call on the government to work across Whitehall to stand up for low-paid workers internationally. The honourable member for Glasgow North had many comments to say about the importance of looking at employment in poverty, and Professor Sen, who I quoted earlier, has also investigated this greatly, and I think we could all learn that actually the things that we are calling for those in other countries are only those which we would want for our own friends and family in employment in this country. I hope that the government will go forward on that basis, and I look forward to debating these issues more as we move forward in this Parliament.
Joe Johnson.